And that's why my arms are so tired. What's going on, everybody? This is the Coverbandconfidential podcast, the podcast for cover band musicians and band leaders to learn how to rock more and sing less. Very jet-lagged and bi-coastal in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Adam Johnson.
Very sitting here doing nothing in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm Dan Wright.
I literally flew in last night. We could have done fresh off the plane episode, but
No,
I figured it was probably a good idea to,
yeah,
sleep on it. And
Yeah.
I didn't really talk about guitars for like 24 whole hours. So I feel like
awesome.
I've pressed the reset button.
Yeah, it's all settled into your brain. You're ready
Yes.
to come back to it fresh. I'm with you.
Exactly. Well, how's it been going?
Good. Played really fun acoustic solo show on Saturday, which I billed, of course, as my last show, Dan's last show. Yeah, I think I said a couple weeks ago, be going under the knife for some foot care, some pretty intense foot surgery, which will be happening the 31st, Friday. That if you're listening to us contemporaneously, probably it's the day you're listening to this. I'm having that, so I will appreciate any good vibes that are consistent with your own personal cosmology that you feel like sending me.
Some have already come through.
Yeah.
Everybody knows.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was great. A lot of my regulars were there to support me and enjoy last time together for a bit. And yeah, we'll just see how that goes. But
I mean, that's got to feel pretty satisfying that like people like
totally
showed up.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Now, this week is also the week that we introduce a new tier in the Patreon where Dan takes pictures of his feet and you are up with the progress. It's a very niche level, but it's super expensive. So
yeah,
just throwing that out there.
Yeah, nobody wants that. But if you do, it's going to cost you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
No, it was good. I did put out in the email blast that I put out, we should do something special, like wear one boot day or hop around on one foot day or foot pics night. Okay, probably not that, but something. And nobody really took me up on it being special. We just had a good time together.
If I had put something on and be like, hey, this is important to me, come out, and anybody showed up, I would be touched.
No, it's super gratifying. Totally. I had a bunch of people from my Lexington crew that used to come to my weeklies down there. Haven't seen some of them in, a year or so. So yeah, it was great.
While you're down for the count, do you have any plans or ideas of things you're going to work on or work through?
Yeah, I have yet to really understand how to send MIDI signals through the headrush. So that's the thing I want to work on. I do want to expand my library of tracks for the 80's show while I'm sitting around. And I did acquire myself a Steam
there it is. That's what I thought.
So I'm sitting around playing some video games.
I'm curious if we slice that into a pie, how much each of those activities is going to get.
One of them actively keeps track of your usage, so I'll be able to report on that one. The other projects that I have, when they fall to the side, I won't have documentation of that per se.
Oh, come on.
I will say, as like a gaming interested guy who's mostly a Mac user, like having a device that can play like all those games that Macs just can't touch. It's been fun. It's been a fun week.
Yeah, totally not the same thing at all. But I got one of those romplers for Christmas where you can just play all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
But I'm the thing that I am now realizing when one of the things that it has is it has arcade games.
Right.
And when you have unlimited credits, you really realize that every single one of those objective is just to like kill you as fast as possible, to just keep you pumping quarters in.
Totally.
It's wild. I made it to like some level on the Simpsons arcade game that I never would have touched. It would have cost me hundreds of dollars in the 80s or 90s to get to that point.
Right. Well, the Steam Deck does have very good retro emulation on it as well, although I've been emulating Xbox and Xbox 360 games mostly. So
fair enough.
Yeah, it's all good.
All right. Well, don't have much other housekeeping stuff. I mean, no reviews this week. We all know what we're going to talk about this week, which is my recap of Namm.
And listen, I'll tell you what. Whenever I mentioned that you were in Namm, my wife's been like, "Oh yeah, when I was in Namm, just takes me back to when I was in Namm." Like there's a different Namm that she's referring to.
Yes, to the civilian world, it's a funny acronym to be saying things, and how excited everybody is for Namm. That's and right. The things that you bring back from Namm. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
The flight out was very challenging. We had a snowstorm blow through again in Georgia, which is strange. And basically all of TSA called out. And so they had 2 lanes open for a very busy week. and I was through security in just over 3.5 hours, missed my flight.
Oh,
The good thing about flying from one big city to another big city is they have one about every other hour. So I was delayed, but I was able to make my destination same day. So I did miss the press event, unfortunately, but there's nothing to be done. And to fill in everybody, I was staying at a house with a bunch of other creators, and that was sponsored by Sweetwater, which was really crazy to be able to do this for no additional funds. And everything that I did spend was compliments of the Patreon. So thank you guys very much for the support. And it was just really cool because I hadn't met any of these other folks, with the exception of Jason, who's with Working Class Music and kind of my neighbor. And it was good because we ended up rooming together. And now we were in this special house that's like, right outside of Anaheim. So it was geared towards like families going to Disney World. And so every room was themed. And Jason and I got the princess room.
excellent.
There was a big mural right above my bed, and it was very pink and let's say soothing.
Yeah.
Though I did find blood stains on the drapes for some reason. We're just gonna
just pretend
past.
Yeah, just move
right.
on.
So as far as the other folks in the house, it was the guitar dads. So that's Dave and Matt, and then Landon Bailey, who's a separate creator, Jason Mays, who's a part of Working Class Music, like I said earlier, Philip Carter, who does the 40 Watt podcast, and then Ryan and Steve from 60 Cycle Hum. Last but certainly not least, Joan from Pedal Playhouse. So there was like 11 of us in this house.
Sweet.
It was nice because there was always something to do. A lot of times, I guess last year when I went, I didn't have a companion or a group of people that I was traveling with. So I didn't always know what was going on and where it was. With this kind of group, they all have different contacts. So it's like, oh, we're going to this Taylor thing. And there was this other. So there was always like, you kind of had your finger on what was going to be happening.
And you had a lot of good tag along opportunities.
Oh yeah. And one of those was the Paul Reed Smith 40th anniversary party. And I just got I got a mysterious text message that said, "You did not get this from me." And then I RSVP'd and they let me in. It's crazy. That's kind of like the big picture stuff, but let's kind of like talk about the actual show itself. Now, it's if you don't know what Namm is, it's basically the music instrument industry, live sound industry, showing what they're putting out in the market this year. So there's typically, product announcements and some hullabaloo, and just about every major manufacturer is there. And this year was unique because both Fender and Gibson were back, sort of. They have not participated in the past few NAMMs. I think it's been since around
COVID, right?
Yeah, I think so. But they weren't really there other than for dealers and certain members of the press. You couldn't actually go into their booths or see anything. So while there may have been a presence, it wasn't necessarily something that you felt. And there were a couple of announcements from them, but nothing really groundbreaking. So it was just kind of strange. You would see their logos. Gibson had set up like one of the guitar thrones where they put the pieces of the guitar. You can take pictures on it, but that's literally the only interaction with Gibson most people had at the convention. And I think it also left a lot of room for smaller companies to kind of take up space. And I don't think that's what those two companies would have intended, but it really kind of shifted the conversation away from them. And I guess the biggest name that had come back was Marshall. They had a massive booth and they were doing performances and they had a bunch of really interesting pieces, but I don't know, the vibe was weird over there. And they've got some cool stuff coming down the pipe and none of it's available yet. It's a weird situation for them specifically. The coolest thing that happened on the first day, and it was getting the chance to meet JT and John from the Patreon group. They were wandering around and we just kind of all found each other. And when I saw John Walsky, who's from Vegas, I'd met him last year at NAMM. He was wearing the guitar company name shirt that's in the merch store. And I also happen to be wearing that shirt. So there's literally two people on the planet who have that shirt and we both wore it on the same day.
Love it.
I should have bought a lottery ticket because the odds were too good.
Yeah.
For that one. We got a chance to catch up. And I mean, that's really what Namm is for most of us, is like getting a chance to see people you only see once a year and do, Namm things together. So it was great.
Great.
Let's talk about the stuff itself. Now, we've got a unique perspective because, there was mostly guitar things, but lots of live sound, lots of production, lots of other really cool products. And I just wanted to kind of run off my favorites or things that really stood out to me. One thing that was really interesting is that the entire show had this kind of 80s bend to it. It seemed like every single station had some neon kind of out there 80s kind of vibe to it.
Okay.
The real standouts were Cower in the boutique showcase. They had these crazy pink and white and blue, like paint splattered offerings. They were gorgeous. Cool. And every time I see a Cower, I was like, these are the greatest guitars. I wish I could afford to own one. And I can't, because they cost as much as a car. But Doug is the nicest guy. And I went over and talked to him for a while. He's actually in one of the videos that I hope to put out this week. Beyond that, we talked about the Rockman. It was definitely a very popular piece of gear that everybody was talking about. And
I'm sure you got to demo it, right?
I did. It is absolutely worth the hype. It does exactly what it says it can do. And I'm trying to figure out a scenario where I could use it as my sound engine. The real thing is just trying to figure out the stuff that it doesn't do that you could fill a board with, right? Because it's got the chorus, but it doesn't have like delay or reverb. And would you want something that's like accurate to the era, or would it be something that's kind of like a modern take on a classic thing? But I think I could do it with like 2 pedals or less and have like a full 80s rig.
Yeah. The videos I've been seeing about it have been pretty stunning.
Yeah. And I mean, it is a very specific flavor of guitar sound, and not for everybody. Yes. And I definitely had a lot of folks that weren't at the show going like, it doesn't, that's not good. It's not a good sound.
No, like, it's not. No, it's not. But I mean, those of us who wore one of those on our belt and drove our guitar into cheap ass earbuds, like there's a real vibe there. Not only does it sound like some classic recordings, it sounds like what it sounded like in the music room at my high school when I was playing through the original one of those,
Yeah. I said that if it sounded like the intro to Hysteria, I would get one, and it did. And I am.
Yeah, it does.
So done deal. The craziest 80s throwback though, and this was something that like was genuinely shocking to people in attendance. PV reissued a bunch of their 80s era amps.
Huh. Wow.
The big ones being that they're doing a Josh Homme signature Decade, which is it's literally like a 10-inch speaker, like a tiny little amp, but that's, a big part of his sound. And they also took all of their famous retro amp series and they made pedals for them. Wow. So you can get a PV Bandit, you can get all of these different sounds. And again, yeah, it's confounding and confusing to those of us who lived through that era. But again, there's just certain things that.
Yeah, no, listen, the last time I heard a PV Bandit was at a pawn shop in Salt Lake City when I was about 18. And I wanted it. I didn't buy it.
Well, guess what?
Now I can get it in a pedal.
Now's your chance.
That's very, very cool.
Well, and it's funny because like you were giving me this funny look, but we literally just said the exact opposite of what you were thinking about the Rockman, when you're like, because every single one of those amps means a lot to a particular kind of musician.
That's right.
And
that's right. Yeah.
It was pretty cool to go into their booth and see a bunch of these old school silver badge amps. Like I remember in the church music room.
Yep.
That had been there since Lord knows when.
Yeah. I mean, I owned a PV solid state. It wasn't even good, but it was what I had. It was my first amp.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great.
Everybody that went in there and checked them out was like, this is a really interesting idea. And frankly, something they should have done earlier. I mean, those are the products that they are known for.
Yeah.
Outside of, the 5150 type stuff.
Right.
It's such a neat idea.
I'll say this too, it's very validating to somebody who's just stepped into the 80s world, like
Mhm.
that is suddenly a movement that's happening. Usually nostalgia, comes in waves, right? It follows current time by 20 or 30 years or something,
Yep.
and 80s, I've been wondering if 80s was just kinda falling away, and it was gonna be like the 50s, like, very niche-y if you were gonna think back to it, but maybe not. Maybe we're catching a new wave.
80s was like the vibe of the show.
Okay.
The amount of splatter finishes on things that I
You
saw,
sent a bunch of pictures that looked great. They looked
it
so
was pretty
cool.
wild. There was an SJC kit that had like pink splatter on black. There were multiple splatter guitars at the G&L booth. G&L, honestly, one of my favorite showings at Namm. They had this tiny little booth, especially compared to like, all of the others. But what they had there was really phenomenal, and had a really great conversation with those guys and just played pretty much everything at the booth, and it was all amazing. So if you haven't checked out GNL recently, you should look into it because the stuff that they're putting out this year is pretty rad.
Cool.
Now, as far as guitars go, I played a bunch of them and I really like the Cowers, but I think the best guitar that I played was at this tiny stand called Grizinia Guitars. I was introduced to them through my buddy Jeff, who works with them. Their product offerings kind of unique, kind of more of like the sludgy, doomy kind of deal. They actually had an Evertune RD shape with a full aluminum neck, like as doom metal as you
Wow.
could possibly imagine.
Huh. Yeah.
But they also had this metal hollow flake black Explorer with custom Seymour Duncans that matched the finish of the guitar.
Hmm.
It was by far the best guitar I played there, and it was shocking. Like, I was blown away. I sat there and I played that guitar probably more than any other the entire show. So you should find them on social media. I follow them on Instagram. It's GRZENIA, Grisenia Guitars.
Making a note.
Hard to spell, but yeah, their stuff is really cool.
When you type that first word in, the second word that Google prompts you with is guitars, and then you know you spelled it right.
But yes, if you like anything pointy or doomy, they're your folks. And they were right across from Dunnable, which is again another kind of doomy.
Listen, there's some offset looking things there. I wouldn't say they're
Mhm.
all pointy and doomy.
Well, the ones that I like were.
Oh, well, fair. I mean, there's an SG looking guy, there's a Jag looking guy. They have some options.
Yeah. They also were giving out hot sauce. So if you shredded at their booth, you would get a free bottle of
Sweet.
hot sauce.
Sweet.
So I got one of
Right.
those floating around somewhere.
Awesome.
The other two things that I really want to talk about are products that little off the beaten path, not necessarily something that you would think about, but if you had them, you would appreciate them a lot. So the first one is called the Lily Pad, and it is one of those things that, like, I feel like every single person that listens to this show and plays with a band should have. And that is, it's a small pad that you lay on the ground and it's got a cable coming out of it. And it is a microphone ducking system, basically. It's not a gate per se, but the way that it works is you step on the pad and it raises the volume of your microphone instantly. And then when you step off of it, it ducks it down. So it
Huh.
doesn't fully turn it off, and you have 3 levels that you can select from. But the number of times that we have been in a place where we had opted to bring live drums and there was just like nothing we could do in regards to keeping the cymbals from coming through the vocal mics,
Yeah.
I would have killed for 2 or 3 of these things.
So the idea is you step off it and it ducts your mic out and stops stage bleed.
Right. So anything other than what your body would have blocked is reduced considerably.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
I tried it out and I probably like freaked out on the guy a little bit because I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I can't believe nobody's thought of this before. And we had a really good conversation, and I hope to get 1 or 2 and take them for a spin.
Does the signal pass through it, or?
Yeah, it comes with like a pedal shaped unit that microphone XLR goes into, microphone XLR comes out of, and there's some dip switches that you can select the amount of rebound time that you have, and then the level of ducking that it does.
Okay. That sounds smart.
But it's cool because it's basically a mechanical product. It's not something that can necessarily fail. He said they've sold X number of them, and they don't have a repair department. Like none of them have failed. So
right.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
If we get a chance to work with them, you will be hearing about that a lot more. But now I want to talk about what I consider to be the product of like the Namm product.
I think I have a hint at what this is.
Most people are going to disagree with me, but I feel like I feel pretty justified in my selection. And this was a product that was released by Rev Amps, mostly well known for their really incredible high gain amp heads. But this isn't an amp. It is something totally unique that up to this point, I don't think anybody has thought of or had done commercially. And when I saw it, I actually didn't think it was a commercial thing. I thought it was just like a promo deal that they did for their booth. So when you walked up to Rev's booth at the show, they had like 4 full amp stacks. And instead of speaker grills in those, those 4x12 cabs, they had LED panels.
Yeah.
And in this span of cabinets, they have made like a widescreen display, and they were playing videos on it. And I walked up to them and was like, this is fantastic. That was really smart for you guys to do for the show. And they were like, oh no, this is a product. We're selling these. And I did something very similar to what I did to the poor guys down at Lilypad. My eyes got real big, and I was like, do you realize what you've done? And I don't think they had. Because when I was talking to the main guy, he was like, oh, Tremonti bought 20 something of these, and this band bought 80 of that. It's like, no, there's an entire subgroup of people that there are many more of than big name touring acts that could use these for their show production. Because immediately I was like, I don't care how much they cost. I'm buying at least 2 of them.
Yeah.
Because that is crazy production value that you can add for what I consider to be a fairly reasonable price.
Do you know the price?
I do know the price. I'm not sure if it's out there yet, but it's a lot. But as a person who has sourced out LED displays elsewhere, it was surprisingly reasonable.
Okay.
Now, the display that they had was probably over 20 grand, but not everybody needs that many.
Right.
I'm just saying, putting a cab on either side of the drum set, man, that would be a really huge upgrade. And I think that, I think venues would be silly to not get into these if you were like a backline company or, bands like ours. Like, that's what I was trying to tell. I was like, bands that are still playing out and making good money, like, this is a really compelling product for them. I thought it was an absolute genius move, because we all know that, I mean, we play modelers. And so our need to purchase things from amp companies has pretty much diminished to nothing.
Right.
So for them to kind of look at the market and go, here's an interesting opportunity that we can take advantage of regardless of whether they play our gear or not.
Right. That
takes a level of ingenuity and cleverness that I was truly blown away. I was like, this is the smartest thing I've ever seen, because now I want to buy. I left a bunch of messages. I'm being a lot. I'm not gonna lie, but I really want them super bad. Even just down here in the dungeon, just to like set up.
Yeah, next to Elvis back there, blink away behind you. Yeah,
obviously, that's what I need.
Totally.
So yeah, and listen, there were tons of other things that I really enjoyed. There were, lots of other guitars and pedals and gear and stuff, but those were the ones that really jumped out at me. I did go and check out the QSCs. They did sound really good. They had like a 3 or 4 piece jazz ensemble playing through them, filled the room pretty well. So I think there's some there. You're probably gonna have to check it out for yourself to see if that's gonna, fill the space that we thought they would.
Well, Electro Voice came out with two new models of the EV range that I use the M50s of. There's now a 75 and a 90 that are like way more power and way more power.
Yep.
And it's pretty compelling stuff.
I did see those. The base model, like where the sub was massive. Like they didn't have them powered like pushing sound out, but I can imagine that it was like pretty considerable.
Yeah, because I've had to add an 18-inch sub to my M50s, and it made a big difference. Just pulling the poor man's cutover out
Mhm.
of those stacks cleaned them up a lot, and was well worth doing. But boy, if they have solved that for band and big space DJs,
Mhm.
uh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
that's really what was needed in that range. So
But
look
I
forward to
mean, that kind of proves the point that we had made is like, is QSC a little late to the game at this point? Because if
Mm,
they're putting out like Rev 3, Rev 4 of these products, they've had enough time to really
right.
dial them in.
Right. It's interesting that EV is not doing the built-in mixer feature
Mhm.
in those two larger SKUs.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about. Both of my 50s are the mixer version of them, and I use that for acoustic all the time.
Right.
So I don't know. It's interesting trade-off.
They're probably just looking at that like, again, who's primarily going to be using them and what kind of capacity they're using them for.
For sure. For sure.
They're probably like, let's put, whatever resources that we would have put into that into like beefier amps or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. 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 100%.
So yeah, that's pretty much Namm in a nutshell. I mean, it was so much. It was a lot of fun getting the chance to meet you guys and other creators and seeing famous people walking around like they're just like normal folks. And it was wild. And if you get the chance to do it, I highly recommend it. And if you do, we should set a meetup there because it was a lot of fun.
I'll say my FOMO is off the charts, so we'll need to find a way to get
Listen,
both of us out there for the next one.
on day one, I clocked over 18,000 steps. I don't think you're
I couldn't have made it this time, but in a year, I'll be ready.
all right. It's a date then.
Okay.
If you have any specific questions about the show or products or anything like that, shoot us an email, coverbandconfidential@gmail.com. I mean, I've just got 3 days worth of gear news like shoved into my face. So
You're not going to talk about on our shared notes here. You mentioned weird stuff. You're not going to get into that.
I guess so. I mean, every year there's always a few things. Now in previous years they had a lower level in the guitar area, and they referred to it as the basement or the dungeon. But this year it was also where will call was for your passes, so you had to walk through it at least once. And it's typically the place where the most innovative products are going to be because they're smaller booths, they cost less money. It's usually startups and that kind of thing. And I had a lot of really good conversations with people on that level. That's where I saw the lily pad, and there was a couple of other products. I had mentioned something about a locking tuner system that I want to get some more information about. That might be cool for guys who like Floyd's but want to be able to play things in different tunings, gig to gig. But there were some oddballs for sure. Top of the list is the automatones. I feel like we've talked about those before. It's like the little kind of synthy thing that looks like a music note, and it's got a mouth that you squeeze. And
I have one around here somewhere.
Yeah, we've got one also. And their booth is one of the funnest ones there. And the guy who's like the inventor of it comes to the show and does demos and stuff. It's
Awesome.
really something. Then in the basement, I found a couple of products. There was this one had this it was like a circle around the strings that had these little kind of plectrums you could attach to them, and it would spin, and depending on the height of whatever the circle was, it would pick in this kind of like rhythmic pattern. It was a lot, and you can go online and see demos of it. I don't know what I would use something like that for, but I guarantee you somebody out there would see that and be like, think that's pretty cool.
For sure. Someone's going to write a great indie tune that depends on that.
For sure. I was excited about this, and then I wish there was a little more to it, but I found a manufacturer that was doing Telecasters, but they were shaped like 8-bit video game style. So like a pixelated telly.
Cool.
And it looked really cool, but it was like this weird, like blue, yellow burst thing. I was like, I don't really dig that color. And the price was definitely right, but I was like, does it come in any other color? Like, nope, just these two. I was like, ugh, can't do anything with that. If it was like just like a monochromatic thing, like black or white or something, like, no, they didn't have that though. And then the one that definitely drew the most attention was the fart pedal. And it wasn't just a fart pedal. They were kind of showing off their entire line of fart pedals, selling merch in, I mean, they were on the main floor, you know, in an area where, you know, there was a fair amount of foot traffic. So they probably sold more t-shirts than they sold pedals as far as that goes, but it was definitely something that everybody was talking about.
I'm sure.
So rock on fart pedal.
Rock on fart pedal. That's our next t-shirt.
I mean, yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Why not?
I mean, I feel like every design, you know, we sell a couple of them. So yeah, we'll just do one. And if you want it, we'll make it. Rock on fart pedal. With that being said, I think it's probably time to wrap it up.
Let's do it.
Want to go ahead and thank Sweetwater again for the trip. It was absolutely incredible. And all of the folks from the hashtag Namm House, y'all keep doing what you're doing and can't wait to see you again, and thumbs up and all that good stuff.
And I'll catch you next year.
Yes. If you like to support the show, you can do any of the stuff you're about to hear, but I'll go ahead and call it for this week. In Atlanta, Georgia, I am Adam Johnson.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, Dan Ray.
You have been listening to the Coverbandconfidential podcast for the week of January 31st, 2025.